Hey guys, Zeke the Geek, and I'm here today on the Pokemon Global Link, where we're going to be doing something a bit different. Now, normally I just give out some live VGC videos, and hopefully through that you guys can get better, or I can get better, and you guys can just watch some live VGC, but today is something a bit different, and this was requested by My Apollo Project. His YouTube link will be in the description down below. Definitely go check him out. He does some competitive battling on Showdown as well, but I believe he does OU and lower tiers, not VGC. But other than that, he said that he really wants to get into the metagame, and he said maybe you should just teach us about it and stuff. So I do know a pretty decent amount about the 2015 metagame, because it has been the only VGC metagame I've ever actually been a part of, because I haven't been playing VGC before 2015. But other than that, we're just gonna go right into this, and I'm gonna hopefully give some useful tips about the metagame, common Pokemon. Here we've got the top 12 Pokemon that are used, and we'll have lots of information. I'm just gonna analyze them, easy ways to beat them, what to predict from them, and so on and so forth. So obviously we're gonna start off with Kangaskhan. Now, if you've ever played VGC, it's a pretty good chance that you ran into this thing. Now, obviously, as you can see from its held item, it's always a Kangaskhanite. I don't know why the heck there's a Razorfang. Who knows why someone did that, but basically it's gonna be a Mega Kangaskhan. And now there are a few different ones. These Brave, Naughty, and Sassy are for the Trick Room variants, although normally people don't really run those, and because Kangaskhan has been used on Trick Room before, but it's not that great. So normally it'll be Jolly or Adamant, and it's interesting to see that Jolly is actually more common. It definitely used to be more in Jolly's favor, but now Adamant has definitely been going up because Bulky Kang has been becoming much more useful, although Jolly Kang is still out there to beat other Kangs. So they tend to reach about 150, 160 speed, Adamant or Jolly, depends. But definitely when you do see this thing come out, Fake Out is probably its first goal, but you have to see what is next to it, because sometimes there's no need for them to go for Fake Out. If they outspeed you, they'll go straight for something like a Double Edge or Return. Now, Double Edge is used more, but on bulky Kangs it'll probably be a Return, so definitely keep your eye out for that. But Double Edge is going to hurt a lot. It will do some recoil, so if the Kang is getting nice and low, it'll probably take itself out. Now, one thing that's very interesting is low kick has definitely been very high ever since the move tutor. Low kick has just been on all the Kangs recently, but it is still 70% because there are a few people who do use Power Up Punch, which is a threat if they do get it off, but it won't be OHKOing anything, so you will have a chance to KO it first. But Sucker Punch as well, just be careful because it will take out your Psychic type, Ghost types, and all that stuff. Plus with Parental Bond, this thing kind of destroys your frail Sash users, so Kangaskhan, highly used, it's a threat, and as you can see here from the common Pokemon used alongside it, they're all also very common Pokemon, save Zapdos and Cresselia, although I'm surprised Cresselia isn't actually on this top 12 most common used on BattleSpot. By the way, this is on BattleSpot, but Cresselia is definitely one of them that we'll probably go over after we go over the 12. But Kangaskhan is definitely a powerhouse, and if you want to look at more information in depth, definitely go to the Pokemon Global Link, check it out, and it's quite useful. Now, easy ways to beat Kangaskhan are obviously any fighting type that can hurt pretty hard. Now, I, on my Mega Venusaur team, have Terrakion, and Terrakion destroys Kangaskhan, because not only do I outspeed, but close combat easily one-shots it, and Kangaskhan likes to deal with other Pokemon commonly used with Kangaskhan. Rock Slide takes out Talonflame, Close Combat takes out Heatran, Close Combat takes out Bisharp, Rock Slide hurts Zapdos and Thundurus, although you're going to have to be careful of some of the bulkier partners like Aegislash, Cresselia, or Sylveon, which Terrakion can't really touch, or Landorus, but that is just, you'll be prepared for those because you're going to have an entire team. But Kangaskhan, I highly suggest always have a way to be able to OHKO Kang. Normally I build my core and I'm ignoring the fact that I need a way to OHKO Kang, and then once I get a good 4 to 5 Pokemon, I look back at my team and I say, do I have a way to destroy Kangaskhan? Because I don't want that thing to just sit in there, launch Double Edges, maybe even get Power Up Punches off, because that is a threat. But if I already have a way to deal with it, okay, great, I already have a way to OHKO it. If I don't, then there are tons of fighting types out there that can fit onto any team pretty easily. Terrakion, one of them. It's not too hard to put him on a team. Also, you can just put a sash on him as well, and it works fairly well. So that is the Kangaskhan, the wonderful threat he is. I've used him before, used all the time, the most common Mega. But now go on to the next Pokemon, Lando T, which actually has been going up insanely high in usage. I know in the International Challenge for April, it was used more than Kangaskhan, which is very interesting. But as you can see, it's just Earthquake, Rock Slide, Superpower, U-Turn are the most common moves. I guarantee you those 4 moves are pretty much going to be on any Lando T, unless they decide to be interesting and do things such as like Knock Off, Protect, Stone Edge. Obviously, Protect will be used on maybe not Assault Vest, but Yachi Berry or Focus Sash or just other things. But this, as we're gonna see right here, 70% of the time it's a Scarf. It's just gonna launch away Earthquakes and Rock Slides. But do take note of what move it uses, because if it locks itself into Earthquake and you have Levitate or Flying Pokemon, definitely send them in, because then this Landorus won't be doing anything to them. Also, if they're locking themselves into Rock Slide, you gotta be careful, because Lando T, Choice Scarf, Rock Slide, 30% chance to flinch both your Pokemon. It's gonna be a problem, so definitely watch out for that. Although Lando T, this ground flying typing, it's not too hard to have ways to beat it. All you really need is any ice type move will take this out, unless it's the Assault Vest, then you might need it to be Stab. But honestly, Ice Beam on pretty much anything, or even HP Ice will take this thing out, and if you have it, you're good. It's really easy to take this thing out just because HP Ice you can put on almost any special attacker. So even like Thunderous, even if it's a support Thunderous, you can still plop on HP Ice and you already countered Lando T's. Ice Beam can be put on a lot of Pokemon, and Lando T isn't the most bulky Pokemon. I do know that my Latios on my Mega Venusaur team, I'm going to keep kind of referring back to that team, because it's the team that I use the most competitively. My Latios does get Ice Beam, but I never got it because it's not worth it. When Psyshock or even a Draco Meteor, they both can take out Lando T's. So Lando T, pretty frail, very fast, and hits hard because of its Choice Scarf. Definitely be careful about it. Don't let it surprise you. Watch what it locks itself into, though, because you can take advantage of that. If it locks itself into Superpower, U-turn maybe, you know, just pay attention to what it locks itself into. Have an Ice type move. You'll easily be able to take it out. Now, I am talking about ways to take out these Pokemon. Now, you shouldn't go out there and build a team just to counter the top 12. But rather, you should make a team and now see, do you have a weakness to these top 12? Because if you don't even have a weakness to them, that's fine. You don't even need to worry about them. But if you do, then you have to make sure you have a way to counter them. Like if you have a glaring ground type weakness or fast rock slides or superpower weakness or something, definitely make sure something on your team can OHKO Landorus. Same goes for Kangaskhan. Now, as we go on, some of these Pokemon become less threatening in the fact that you don't have to one-shot them. The reason why I think Kangaskhan and Lando T, you really need a way to just take them out right away, is because they can sit there and unleash hell onto your team if you're not careful. They hit so hard even when it's neutral, so you got to be careful about that. But let's move on to the next, Talonflame. Of course, this bird, this annoying hell of a bird. I hate this thing with my dear heart, even though I use it quite a lot, and I have used it in the past quite a lot. As you can see, Brave Bird, 92.4% of the time it's on Talonflame. That's kind of obvious. I mean, Gale Wings, Brave Bird, that's all this thing even needs. Sometimes you don't even need the other 3 moves, especially if it's got a Choice Band or something. But we're going to quickly show you the items. Life Orb is very common, but also Choice Band, so you gotta be able to take those hits because they hit really hard. And because it's priority, even if you got like a Trick Room team, this thing is still a threat. I mean, it's powerful. Focus Sash is also used, but if it is a Sash and it does go for the Brave Bird, it breaks its own Sash, so that's always nice. But it's the Life Orb and Choice Band Brave Bird that really hurts. I use Life Orb personally just because I like to have things like Tailwind, Protect, maybe Quick Guard. You can even run Taunt on it, so don't ever fall for that trap of letting it taunt to one of your like your Cresselia or something, so be careful about that. Now, Flare Blitz is up here at 78%, but if you're running a Life Orb set, I highly suggest going with Overheat. Now, if you're using it, that is, just because Overheat allows you to attack on the special side, and normally with Overheat you're going to be hitting the majority of the time you're overheating things like maybe an Aegislash or a Moonguss or maybe like a Ferrothorn, even though that thing's not ever really used, but steel types and bulky grass types and stuff that honestly Overheat will be doing almost the same amount as Flare Blitz. You won't be taking recoil and you'll be hitting on the special side, so you don't have to worry about things like King's Shield, Rocky Helmet, so honestly I prefer Overheat. Now you can just make the nature something like obviously Adamant Jolly are used the most. I suggest Adamant because it's got Gale Wings, but one of these, I believe it's Hasty or something, that lowers your defense, increases your attack. That's probably one of the best, just because you're not going to be living physical moves anyways, so you might as well go for that. And that's basically Talonflame, although this thing is super easy to KO, and you can use Terrakion to take this out, just like you can use Kangaskhan, or Terrakion to take out Kangaskhan. This is why I use Terrakion, just because it takes out quite a few threats. But basically, throw a Pebble at this thing and it's going to fall. It's really weak to Rock Slide. Just hit it with any rock type move. Doesn't even have to be stab, and it's gonna go down. It's the same way how you can take out Charizard actually. So I highly suggest have some sort of rock type move on your team. Rock Slide is probably the best move in the entire game, just because it hits so much. It's spread, it flinches, it destroys Talonflame. But you got to be careful of that priority Brave Bird because it is annoying and it's gonna hit hard. That's moving on from the top 3. Now we have some more. Those 3 are very easy to counter, I feel like, very easy to predict as well. You see Talonflame, look at their team. If they got a pretty slow team that kind of wants a Tailwind, then be careful because it's probably going to get a Tailwind up. There's almost no way to stop that because it is priority. What else? If you've got a Brave Bird weakness, it's definitely going to start Brave Birding that spot, so definitely be careful about that. It is priority. Again, you can stop it with a Quick Guard, which is very nice because it is priority, but be careful. Talonflame hits hard, but it is frail. All 3 of those, Kangaskhan, Lando T, and Talonflame, all can hit really hard, but they're all easily one-shottable, so if you have a way to easily deal with them on your team, it's definitely worth a Pokemon slot, and it's not even that hard. It's more of like a move slot that you're going to be using up, so it's not that bad. Now, moving on to the next one is Sylveon. Now, I'm surprised that this thing is still 4th, because as the metagame has progressed, I haven't actually encountered as many Sylveons. It is definitely still out there, so I understand why it's 4th, but just over time I have seen it kind of die down. Now obviously it's got that pixelate ability, turning its normal type moves into fairy type moves, so 100% of the time it's going to have Hyper Voice, and almost, I'm going to say like 90% of the time it's running or 65% of the time it's running Choice Specs. Otherwise it's got like Pixie Plate or Life Orb. These are all just to make Hyper Voice do insane damage. The reason why it's almost always Choice Specs is because all it wants to do is spam Hyper Voice. It has nothing else it needs to do. And if it is that Choice Spec set, it'll have Hyper Voice, Psyshock, Shadow Ball, and then normally like a Hidden Power Ground to hit those Heatrans. So this thing just wants the Hyper Voice spam. But honestly, that's not too bad. It does hit very hard, even on the neutral side. It's very slow. That's the one thing you have going for you with Sylveon. A double target with neutral physical hits will take it out. It's weak to poison and steel. That's about it. So you may or may not have that on your team, but if you do, then you can easily one-shot it that way, but you don't really need to, just because it is going to be going last almost all the time. Now do be careful if this thing is under Trick Room and it gets fast Hyper Voices with Choice Specs off, then you're in a bit of trouble, because that's going to hurt a lot. And it is spread, it does go by Substitute, so be careful about that. Now when I personally run Sylveon, I run Life Orb Sylveon. That's because I like to put Protect on there instead of normally Shadow Ball, or sometimes Hidden Power, it depends what I'm feeling. But Sylveon is a threat. Most of the time you can tell if it's Specs, because if it never uses Protect, then it's going to be a Specs, and in that case all it takes is a double target and it's dead, or even just 2 spread moves can sometimes take it out, like a Rock Slide or Earthquake. I don't know, something like that. It's going down and you don't even have to worry. It's It can hit hard, so don't let it just sit there and spam Hyper Voice. But, again, it's very predictable. Hyper Voice 100% of the time on it. It's just going to use Hyper Voice. And it's also easily blocked by Wide Guard. Now you got to be careful if it has Moonblast, but they rarely have that anyways. So Wide Guard stops this thing. A double target into it stops this thing. It's slow, it's powerful, but I'm not as worried about Sylveon as things like Kangaskhan and Talonflame and Lando T, which are fast and hit hard. Sylveon's slow, so that's the one thing that's useful when going up against it. But now we move on to Thunderous, which is finally the first not so offensive Pokemon that's commonly used, because those first 4 Pokemon were all very offensive threats. This one's a supporting threat. Now, saying that, it does have some offensive capabilities. Now, the most common set is just a T-Wave, Thunderbolt, Taunt, HPI, Citrus Berry set. As we can actually look at the items, see Citrus Berry, Life Orb, and that's pretty much all you're ever going to see. The Life Orb isn't the more offensive one, maybe a max special attack, max speed Life Orb. Now that does surprise you a lot of the time because you're expecting maybe a support one, so definitely be careful with that, because T-Bolt from a Life Orb, modest, max special attack, Thunderous hurts a lot, so do be careful about that. It does normally carry a hidden power. It's normally hidden power Ice to deal with things like Lando T, and Thunderous is definitely a good check to Lando T, and the dual Genie combo is nice. They really do destroy together, and Thunderous provides nice support with T-Wave as well for things like Kangaskhan. This is why you see Kangaskhan, Lando T, and Thundi so often together, just because Thunderous provides speed control for the Kangaskhan. Lando T can freely Earthquake next to Thunderous, and those 3 are definitely all threats. But you can deal with Thunderous the same way you can deal with Lando T. Now, it doesn't have that ground typing, so you can't just hit it with an Ice type move that'll guarantee an OHKO. Normally it'd be like a 2-hit KO, but that's okay just because it's not going to be OHKOing you back, because it's normally just going to want to unleash Thunder Waves and Taunt. Now, I've never been too worried about Thunderous just because it only sits there. Maybe it throws a few status elements here and there. Maybe it lands a T-Bolt that honestly normally doesn't do too much unless it's a super offensive one. But also this thing doesn't like Rock Slides just because those are super effective, and they hit pretty nice. Now obviously it has no times 4 super effective weaknesses, so because it's electric and flying, its only weaknesses are Ice, Rock, I believe that's about it, but there are still ways to OHKO it. I know my Latios on my Mega Venusaur team, again going back to that team, Draco Meteor, Life Orb, Latios, 252, Modest, does easily take out Thunderous, so it may be support, but it definitely isn't that bulky. You can take it out pretty quickly. That's why they tend to run Citrus Berry, so maybe a few of those 2-hit KOs can go to 3-hit KOs, but Thunderous is quite easy to deal with. And if you can deal with Lando T, you can most of the time deal with Thunderous as well, so that's nice. And now that we've already reviewed both the Genies, if you absolutely have a huge weakness to them and you want to be able to OHKO them, outspeed them at the same time, something I used to do during the early phases of the metagame, where I used to run a Scarf Mamoswine just because it Icicle Crash destroyed Lando T and Thunderous. It OHKO'd both of them, and it was faster than a Jolly Mamoswine. Choice Scarf was faster than an Adamant Choice Scarf Lando T, and that's what they all tend to be, so definitely awesome. Now moving on to number 6 is Aegislash, which I absolutely hate this thing because it is annoying. I mean, King's Shield is a given. They're going to have that. They need some way of going from attack form to shield form. I'm surprised this isn't 100%. I have no clue why it's 99.6%. Who would not run that? After that, Shadow Ball Flash Cannon is almost always common just because both stab. They hit very hard with that 80 base power. Now, Aegislash is definitely a threat because we're about to see on the held item, the weakness policy is the most common one, which is why I don't like to just be like, oh, I can Heat Wave, and then it'll drop, and then Heat Wave in the next turn, and it'll drop again. But normally, I Heat Wave, it lives the hit in shield form, and unleashes a Shadow Ball or Flash Cannon, probably knocks something out, and then maybe I get to get a Heat Wave off later, but it's going to be able to King Shield. Its partner next to it is going to be able to hit me hard, and sometimes you don't even know whether it's going to King Shield or not, so you don't know whether to attack it and waste your turn or not, but if you don't, then it's getting just another free hit off, which is very annoying from it. Now, There are some Life Orb sets that do pick up some more KOs before the weakness policy is activated, and if you see it have the Life Orb set, then it's okay. You can just hit it while it's in shield form with a super effective attack. You're not going to have to worry about any weakness policy. But weakness policy Aegislash is definitely a problem. But again, it is slow, just like Sylveon. It's actually a lot slower. Normally, it's slower than most Trick Room Pokemon, just because it wants to be the last Pokemon to attack in the turn. So that way, it can be in shield form, take hits, get out into attack form, destroy souls. But you can deal with it anyways with a double target super effective hit, or just working around it, being careful of King Shields, and it'll be good. Now, this fourth move here, Wide Guard, is pretty interesting just because it allows Aegislash to also have kind of a form of support, so you kind of have to be careful of that. You don't want to just freely Earthquake, because that can hurt you. It will just Wide Guard and protect itself. Also, that allows it to, if it's got Lando T next to it, the Lando T can still Earthquake, and Aegislash can just Wide Guard, and it will just have itself protected. So basically, all in all, Aegislash can definitely be supportive with Wide Guard, but otherwise, be careful. If it activates its weakness policy, Shadow Ball and Flash Cannon are going to hurt a ton, and this thing doesn't really have too many ways to OHKO it. I actually don't think there are any ways unless it's an attack form, although I do know that neutral hits plus a super effective hit tend to take it out, and also when it does get into Blade form, you can easily take it out then, so normally they're going to have the King Shield, so just being able to predict what Aegislash wants to do easily allows you to beat it, because once you outpredict it, it's not that good. Now, you might think, well, that's for everything, but honestly, it's mainly Aegislash just because it's so slow that you do the right things the right times, and it's kind of useless. Now, also, there is occasional offensive sets with Shadow Sneak, Iron Head, and Sacred Sword. Those are very rarely used, although they are there, so do be careful, because that priority Shadow Sneak can pick up some surprise KOs if you're very low on HP. So I've definitely been caught off guard by that, but it's not really that often used. So that's it for Aegislash. Basically, the more you play VGC, the more you're going to be used to how they tend to play, and you'll be able to start out predicting them pretty soon. Just play, and honestly, you'll understand how to beat them. But next, we're going to move on to Salamence, which I love Salamence. My favorite Pokemon. It's always been ever since it came to be, and once it got its Mega, it just became my favorite again. Now, as we look at his held items, it's pretty much always the Mega Salamence, just because normal Salamence is very frail and doesn't hit that hard, doesn't have too many good moves anyways, because the main reason why people like to use this as a Mega is because it does get that Aegislash, which allows it to be a threat. Now, for now, the special variant is more used. Now, obviously, Protect is on both sets, which is why it's so high up, and there's honestly no reason not to run Protect on a Mega Salamence, just so you can avoid Ice-type moves. But Hyper Voice, Draco Meteor, Flamethrower is the common set for a specially offensive Salamence, while a physically offensive Salamence tends to have Double Edge, Earthquake, Dragon Dance. Occasional special ones might have some sort of hidden power for coverage. Bulky ones might like to have Roost, and then maybe instead of Flamethrower, the special ones like to have Fire Blast. But honestly, there's so many ways to run Salamence, but it tends to just be very offensive and fast. Maybe it'll be a bulky one that wants to set up a D-Dance first, like the one I like to use, and that is definitely a problem. But the one great thing about Salamence is an Ice-type attack will just make this thing crash and burn. Just like Talonflame gets destroyed by Pebbles, this thing gets destroyed by Shards. Now, it is very fast once it Mega Evolves. It reaches like 202 speed, I believe, or no, 189? I believe I'm getting that number right, something like that. Once it Mega Evolves, but before then, it does get outsped by a few things, so it likes to Mega Evolve and Protect and then attack the next turn. If it is the Hyper Voice, be careful, because that is an Aegislash Hyper Voice that does a lot of damage, and you gotta be careful, but also the Double Edge can also do some insane damage, so do be careful. Do figure out whether it is a special or physical, because if it is a physical, the easiest way to beat it is predict which one he wants to Double Edge, Protect, and it fails to pick that one off, and then you just do some damage to it, whether you OHKO it or just pick up some more chip damage. doesn't really matter. If it is the Hyper Voice, that is a bit more challenging, although you do always have the potential for Wide Guard, which kind of shuts that down. But not only that, the special sets kind of can't really use Draco Meteor unless it's going to be like their last move, because other than that, after they use Draco Meteor, they pretty much have to switch. Although there are mixed sets, so do be careful of that, where they run Draco Meteor, Flamethrower, Double Edge, Hyper Voice. So there are many different ways Salamence is run. It is easily taken out with an Ice type attack. Even things like Hydreigon, Draco Meteor will take this out, although you do have to be careful because they can hit you back pretty hard. They almost never have D-Claw though, so you don't have to worry about the Dragon Stab. It's just that powerful flying Aerilate. And Salamence is definitely very good just because there aren't too many good flying types other than Talonflame. There's just not good flying moves out there, and that's a problem I tend to run into, which is when I'm building teams. But Mega Salamence easily fulfill that role, and flying is a very good offensive type, so do be careful with it. Salamence can be power, but when dealt right, Ice Beams will take it out. Or even Icy Winds like to disrupt it, because then it loses its very fast speed. But now we move on to the next mega Pokemon, which tends to be the Charizard Y. As you can see, it's 92% of the time. There are a few people who do run Charizard X as well, which is just kind of for that surprise factor. It's not really that much better. Yeah, when done right, it can be, although if you want to be able to know when it's obvious for which, basically Charizard X tends to be next to things like Clefairy or Clefable, which can provide support for it, because it wants to set up D-Dances. I know Aaron Zhang used a Clefairy and a Charizard X once, and so it kind of went up a bit in usage, but it's pretty easy to predict. Plus, it's weak to rock and ground, so spread moves kind of render that Clefairy next to it useless, but that's how you can kind of identify it. Now, Charizard Y is kind of similar to Talonflame in the fact that one Rock Slide will take this thing out. There's no way it's going to live it, really, unless it's insane investment to take it, although you're going to need a lot of investment, and you would have to be a pretty bulky Pokemon using Rock Slide or something, because Rock Slide's going to take this thing out most of the time. Now, they tend to have Protect, obviously. It's just Protect is on almost all VGC Pokemon if it can be. As long as they're not a choice or something in some fashion, then you might as well run Protect. Other than that, they got Heat Wave, Solar Beam, Overheat, maybe Fire Pledge if they want to be on a Pledge team, so you can easily figure that out if they have a Venusaur, maybe like a Greninja I've seen occasionally next to it. But Overheat is a bit of a problem because that hits very hard in the sun, because obviously Charizard Y summons the sun. Solar Beam allows it to cover water types, so when you run into a Charizard in Team Preview and you think, oh, I can take this thing out with my Suicune, my water type, well, you can't, because first of all, the sun's going to weaken your water type moves, and then he's just going to launch a Solar Beam right into your face and you're screwed. So that's why rock types are my #1 suggestion to take this thing out. Heat Wave is a bit of a problem because it is spread, powerful fire in the sun, but I like to use Heatran against Charizard, something that I recently found was really nice actually. Kind of surprising, but Heatran obviously takes Heat Wave and Solar Beam like a champion, and basically Charizard can't touch Heatran, but then you have the sun, so your own Heatran is boosted. If they risk the Heat Wave, you get your Flash Fire, you're launching a Flash Fire sun boosted Heat Wave that, even though it's resisted, can almost do 50% to a Charizard, if not more, once you get the Flash Fire. So Charizard Y, definitely very commonly used. I ran into it a ton in the International Challenge. It is definitely commonly used, but it's very easy to beat. Again, Terrakion, I'm just referring to him again, because Terrakion honestly counters a lot of these commonly used Pokemon. Terrakion can easily take this thing out with a Rock Slide, or just like a Hariyama with Rock Slide, or pretty much any Rock Slide will destroy this thing, because it is Fire Flying. Easy to deal with. Do be careful about it though. If you don't have a way to OHKO it and it's just sitting there launching Heat Waves, Overheat, Solar Beams, and you have no way to eat up its hit, it can really do some damage. Now moving on to the Heatran, the wonderful Heatran. I love this thing. Very good. Walls, Fairy types, immune to fire, gives you that Flash Fire for whenever someone tries to do a Heat Wave. But this thing obviously gets OHKO'd by ground type moves, so do be careful about that. But Heat Wave, Protect, Earth Power, Flash Cannon, Substitute are basically the 5 moves you're going to see. You rarely see the others, maybe Overheat actually occasionally, but other than that, nothing else really. Substitute and Flash Cannon are the 2 that tend to be changed around. They're both definitely very viable, just because Flash Cannon can knock out those fairies, although with Heatran, because you already wall the fairy, Heat Wave will do a decent amount to it anyways, and you're hitting whatever's next to it, so that's always nice. But we're going to see the held items here. Leftovers is very commonly used, just because Heatran's got this nice natural bulk to it, so it will be eating up hits, and then Leftovers will allow it to survive longer. Now, I'm not really a fan of Leftovers, although if you do have the sub, then it's actually quite worth it, because the sub Leftovers pretty much recovers your substitute damage health. Shuka Bear, I believe that's the one that lowers ground type weakness, halves the damage, which is very useful because it does have a ×4 weakness to it, although Air Balloon also does pretty much the same thing, but you do have to be careful because it can get popped really easily. In my opinion, Leftovers or Tropical Berry tends to be one of the best, or Life Orb even if you want to go really offensive. Now, one thing to note is that because this thing has Earth Power in its moveset, it can easily take out other Heatrans, but as we're going to see here in its nature, tends to be modest, very rarely timid. It normally is a 252 modest and then maybe 252 speed. So that's the spread that I highly suggest if you want to run a Heatran, just because it'll allow you to speed tie with other Heatrans to potentially KO them. Excuse me. So you can potentially KO them with a Heatran if they're slower. Now if they are timid, they're going to be able to KO you, but honestly it's so rare that I don't really worry about that. And the modest 252 set honestly hits very hard, and just a decent speed investment to be able to take out the slower Pokemon, but because of its natural bulk, it's okay if fast Pokemon are faster than it. So, moving on to the next one, basically just ground type move, anything easily takes that out. If you don't have a ground type move, a very powerful fighting type move will be able to take it out, and then water type moves can take it out, of course, but there are very few super offensive water types that can easily take out Heatran. But Heatran does get destroyed by rain, which as we can see is commonly used. But moving on to the next one is a Moonguss, a very annoying support Pokemon that you don't necessarily need a way to just destroy this thing, but you do want a way to make sure it doesn't destroy you, because if it can Spore Spam your team, that's a problem. Now I'm not saying you have to have a Grass type Pokemon on your team so you don't get Spore Spammed, or you have to have a Safety Goggles Pokemon, because you honestly don't. I've had teams in the past where I haven't had that. If you don't have a Grass type Pokemon or a Safety Goggles Pokemon that can be able to stay awake on the field, then do have a way to get rid of a Moonguss quickly. It does have the redirection of Rage Powder, which is also very annoying, just as much as Spore is annoying, but again, working around that is very easy. Again, you can either have Safety Goggles or a Grass type Pokemon, but you don't really need it, because if you just want, you can take out a Moonguss hard and fast, and then after that, do whatever you want it to do. But do be careful, because I know a Moonguss alongside maybe Kangaskhan or Salamence, as they both want to set up, is commonly used, so that is definitely annoying. Do be careful about that. But other than that, it's not that bad. Now, as we're going to see, its ability Regenerate is the most used, so if it does get low on HP, they might want to switch it out just to give it the Regenerator boost, which can definitely be annoying, so do be careful of that. If they do have an FX Spore and you get affected by that, I'm really sorry, because that's hardly used and it kind of sucks for you. But other than that, we're going to see the items here. It's normally just going to be a Rocky Helmet, which I'm actually surprised by how many are Rocky Helmet, but I guess that makes sense just because they tend to be physically bulky. They like to just hurt you back. They kind of is annoying to Kangaskhan, because Kangaskhan might double edge in a Moonguss, and then Kangaskhan pretty much takes like 60% just from Rocky Helmet. So of course, if you want to make it a more recovery and whatnot, then you might have something like Black Sludge or Citrus Berry. Mental Herb also, so you don't get taunted, but again, these are just all so uncommon, you're pretty much going to expect Rocky Helmet. Sludge Bomb has definitely been on them. I'm surprised Foul Play is even on here. But Sludge Bomb, Giga Drain, they tend to be Giga Drain just because the recovery is nice, although it's not going to be hitting hard, so don't worry about that. Now the next one is the Bisharp, which, again, going back to Terrakion, destroys this thing. Any fighting type move will obliterate this thing, but do be careful. It can hit pretty hard, especially because they tend to be Life Orb, but do be careful of the Sash as well, because you might think, oh, I can just get rid of it in one hit. Sometimes they'll be able to hold on with the Sash, which is a bit of a problem. Now, Bisharp is normally just liking to sit there, Iron Head a fairy type, or maybe knock off one of your Cresselia or something like that, which can hurt a lot. Now, Bisharp isn't the fastest Pokemon, but it does hit that awkward middle where it'll get outsped by a lot of common threats, but at the same time it'll be able to outspeed and destroy slower, bulky Pokemon. As well as it can sometimes live a hit with its Sash, hit your super offensive Pokemon pretty hard with like a knockoff or an Iron Head, drop it to very low, to the point where it actually can just take you out with a Sucker Punch. Now, here's the main thing, is the ability. As you can see, it's got Defiant, which is pretty much always used. Defiant, Adamant, just gonna show you guys that, but Defiant basically is why this thing is ever really used, because it allows it so that Lando T doesn't want to just freely switch in ever, because if Lando T does intimidate the Bisharp, then Bisharp gets a free +1. That's basically what Defiant does if you don't know. So do be careful about that, because at that point you might be thinking, oh, okay, it gets this +1, it's slow, I can just attack it anyways and destroy it with my like Earthquake or something. But you gotta be careful, because it does have that Sucker Punch, so it will be going first and then it'll be destroying you. So be careful about that Defiant. But other than that, Bisharp's not too bad. It's got a lot of weaknesses: ground, fire, fighting, all super offensive and easy types to get. So Bisharp's not that bad of a problem. Now we reach the last Pokemon, which is the one and only Politoed. Politoed's obviously the Rain Setter, and that's pretty much all it's got going for it. But not only that, it's actually not too bad offensively or even supportively. As you can see here, it does have Helping Hand and Perish Song, so it can be supportive in that sense. And it also has Scald and Ice Beam, so an offensive one is possible. If we look at the items here, it tends to be just Citrus Berry or Choice Scarf, or occasionally Damp Rock, just to increase that rain time. But other than that, the Choice Scarf is definitely something that's very easy to note, because if it's not a Choice Scarf, then it's probably just going to be a min speed and you're going to outspeed it. But if it does outspeed you, then do note what it gets itself locked into, because it's either going to be Scald or Ice Beam, really. And do be careful, because it could Ice Beam your Lando T or your Salamence potentially, so do want to be careful about that. But other than that, it could be on Perish Trap teams, because it does get that Perish Song, and it could be a supportive one with the Helping Hand. But its main purpose is just to get in there and set up the rain, maybe hit a bit hard, maybe support, whatever it wants to do. Easy ways to counter this is your own weather. If you're scared of rain teams, then definitely bring your own weather. But I'm going to talk about strategies such as weather, Trick Room, and all that whatnot in a second episode, potentially, maybe next week or something like that. So we'll talk about that in a future episode. But that has been some VGC tips about the top 12 commonly used Pokemon in the VGC 2015 meta. So I hope I was able to help. If there's any more questions you have, definitely ask me down below. If you want any other tips and tricks, definitely go out and look for them. Good sources are things such as Nugget Bridge. If you ever want practice, you can always go on Showdown or even Battle Spot. Definitely check out this website if you want to see it for yourself. It is Pokemon Global Link, and then you just go to Doubles, and it'll be at the bottom of the page, as you can see here. Now, also, if you want to see other Pokemon that aren't just these top 12, you can come here to choose a Pokemon, and you will be able to see other Pokemon. Now, of course, some Pokemon, like here, if we go to Excelgar, it's not going to have any data because it's never been used. But if you go over to like a Bombacell, which has been, then you can get some useful information out of it. But other than that, definitely go around and check what other common threats there are. But these are definitely the top 12 in statistics wise, and honestly what I have seen. I agree with this top 12 on these on Pokemon Global Link, and these are all stats based on Battle Spot doubles, so this is 100% true, there's no doubt about it. But other than that, guys, please leave a like on the video if you guys enjoyed, because your support is greatly appreciated. Not only that, comment down below any suggestions you have, anything. What else do you want to see in the future of the series? I definitely know next I will be talking about strategies, how to use them, how to go against them, and I'm hoping that video will be pretty intense, because strategies are obviously the big part about battling. But now that you guys have enough information about the common Pokemon, go out there, practice, you'll learn how to beat them, you'll recognize common Pokemon, and just from playing, you'll be able to get better at the meta. But other than that, subscribe because I'll continue to post daily, and goodbye.